This week's reading focused on two different types of tissues. We looked a little bit more closely at the muscle tissue and the nervous tissue. So to start with muscle tissue, we started with three different types. There is the skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. And we were looking at how they were similar and different. And they are similar because skeletal and smooth muscles both have fasciculi, which help bind together all the different fibers and help the movement. And each of the three different muscle tissues have different types of contraction. That is something that they all have in common, that they work together to provide a same contraction, which allows for some sort of movement throughout the body. Skeletal and cardiac muscle have a sliding filament mode of contraction, while smooth muscle has the cells shorten and extend during their contraction. This would be the muddiest point for me, looking at how each of the different muscle cell types contract. I took a physiology class in undergrad, and this was still probably a struggling point for me. I understood it a little bit more after this reading, but out of everything, this was still probably the part that I struggled with the most. So then how are the different tissue types different? Skeletal is voluntary and uses short, forceful contractions. Cardiac muscle also has these short, forceful contractions, but they are involuntary. And then smooth muscle is involuntary and has long, extended, continuous contraction instead of short bursts, which means also that smooth muscle uses less energy than the cardiac and skeletal muscles do. Smooth muscles also differ from cardiac muscles, and they are not arranged in myofibrils, which means they do not have striations, while skeletal and cardiac muscles do. And so how do these morphological differences between the muscle types reflect their functional differences? Smooth muscles are smaller and have a single nuclei, which I can assume this is because they don't need that quick burst of contraction, but rather have a controlled rhythmic contraction continuously. And then skeletal muscles are long, which I can assume would be important in order to get the most amount of force for a quick contraction to allow our skeletal muscles to move. And then cardiac muscles are long and they are branched out, which I would think this is important in making sure that the heart beats as one muscle together versus having multiple beats, because that would be problematic for our heart. And so that was a little bit about the muscle tissue section, and then we moved on to the nervous tissue. And so the nervous system is composed of neurons and ganglia for different cell connection types. The neurons move the signals down their axons from their cell body into synapses that then pass on to another neuron's dendrites. And then there are also ganglia, which are a group of cell bodies that are found outside of the central nervous system, so they're in the peripheral nervous system. And then there are also supportive cells that help in the nervous system as well. There are some differences in types of cells between central and peripheral nervous system, and this relates back to the myelination. There are Schwann cells that are in the peripheral nervous system, and then there are oligodendrocytes that are found in the central nervous system. And these are the two myelinated cells, which are important to distinguish from unmyelinated cells because they move a lot faster and can help move the information quicker. And so then how do neurons interact with other cells, and what do those connections look like was a question that was asked. And neurons do this through action potentials, which helps relay a signal across the neuron, and then they meet in the synapse and release neurotransmitters, which can go onto another dendrite. And that is the nerve to nerve connection, but then there are also neuromuscular junctions, which allow for communication between neurons and muscle cells. This occurs at the motor end plate, and these are different because one neuron can signal many different muscle cells, where usually it's one neuron to one neuron. So that was just a little bit about the muscle and nervous tissue, and I think after reading these two chapters, I understood these different types of tissues a lot more. Thanks.